The easiest way how to fix your life is to say no. But for a people pleaser, that is the hardest thing in the world. Why? Well, it's the fear of what will happen if I finally, for the first time in my life, give an honest answer, an answer that is authentic but could potentially result in discomfort due to other people disliking me. And that leads me to one of the core points of this video. People-pleasing is not an act of kindness. It's a coping mechanism for low self-validation. It's not about improving other people's lives, but rather improving the image that other people have of us in their mind, just so that we can feel better about our own inauthentic selves. This video is not just for people who would consider themselves a people-pleaser, but also for people who want to understand the painful nature of people-pleasing and why it is such a widespread phenomenon in today's day and age. I mean, a survey that was conducted a year ago from YouGov with a sample size of 1,000 Americans, fairly diverse population by the way, showed that 48% would describe themselves as people pleasers. And from those 48%, so almost half of the sample size, another 48% of which, interestingly, the majority were women, admitted that people pleasing made their life harder. That's why the goal of this video is not just to analyze people pleasing from a philosophical and psychological lens, but to also discuss the solution that allows one to stop doing it and finally break free from this perpetuating loop of inauthenticity. So I hope that you are as ready as I am, because oh boy, we have a lot of stuff to expose. Saying yes even though you want to say no, saying you're fine even though you're not, texting the person who's draining you back because you don't want to seem rude. These are typical behaviors of a people pleaser, and they're quite paradoxical, mainly because they represent a discrepancy between how one feels and how one acts. What one is essentially doing here is reducing their personality to somebody who is at service for everybody else but themselves. They do this to hopefully raise the probability of, first of all, being seen, secondly, being liked, and thirdly, being validated. And this whole process is extremely inauthentic. I mean, you're not choosing to be a good person, you're forcing yourself to be one. It's not a genuine effort, it's something you need to do. You desperately rely on the validation of other people to atone for low self-worth. The validation that you would else be able to give to yourself that you do not have, you need to outsource to somebody else. But before we get any more psychological with this video, we have to discuss a philosophical term that best describes this behavior. A term that was used over 80 years ago by the French existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. If you're French, please don't kill me for my pronunciation. The term is called bad faith. What it best describes is a kind of self-deception where an individual limits themselves to a certain role to avoid the responsibility of choice. Sartre believed that two aspects comprised human existence: facticity and transcendence. Facticity refers to the concrete facts of an individual's existence, so their physical appearance, their job, their social environment, their past actions. Transcendence, on the other hand, is freedom, so the capacity that one possesses to go beyond those given facts. You could say that out of the two, this one is the aspect of human existence that is mostly intertwined with human consciousness, so with our ability to make a change and actually adapt. And this is where we come to the mistake that a lot of people make. They think that acting in bad faith is nothing else than reducing your identity to your facticity. But it can also be reducing your identity to your transcendence. And this is the case because without facticity, so by saying you are everything but a specific role, there is no current state to transcend from. And without transcendence, so by saying you are nothing but this role, there is no consciousness to define the meaning of those facts. What this essentially means is that the more you reduce yourself to a certain role, that role can also be you saying that you're everything else but that role, the more you're acting in bad faith and the more you're deceiving yourself. Sartre best instantiated his concept with a cafe waiter. He was of the opinion that the waiter was reducing his whole identity to his role of being a waiter, all the way from the way how he talked, to the way how he moved, to the way how he put on that fake smile. In his eyes, the waiter was denying his transcendence and limiting himself to the role of serving people. Just like how an object would have a particular function, so like how this pen would be a pen, and how this phone would just be a phone, the waiter was nothing but a waiter. But in Sartre's view, this was false because the waiter is not just a waiter, he is a conscious being that in the moment is choosing to be a waiter, but nothing else. But now one could argue that the waiter is limiting himself to his role because he's following a protocol from the cafe, mainly so that the cafe can have as many customers as possible. And that actually he has an authentic self and he is not denying his transcendence, but he's just putting it away in the moment because that's what society expects of him. And to add on to this, remember the survey from the beginning of the video, another result showed that from the people who consider themselves to be people pleasers, another 32%, from which interestingly the majority were women, said that they were socialized to be the way how they are. I don't know the exact reason for why women are more overrepresented in this opinion, but probably because women tend to be more social beings, but this is a discussion we can have in the comments. But you see, 52% of the people who consider themselves to be people pleasers said that that was not the case, and 16% said that they were not sure. And this is where things get a little interesting, because I think it's obviously clear why the waiter reduces his personality to the role of just being a waiter. It's what the cafe expects of him. It's what the people in the cafe expect of him. But when it comes to the people pleaser, who reduces his identity to a person who acts in the best interest of everybody he knows but himself, I think the reasons are not social but more psychological. And this is where I think it is also important to mention that there is not just one type of people pleasing. You see this kind of behavior in relationships, in friendships, in workspaces, and so on. But there's a backbone for all of it. You're stuck in a perpetuating cycle of inauthenticity. There's a hole of validation that you can't fill up by yourself, which is why you need to get it filled by other people. This likely comes from dynamics in the past with parents or friends where you were only valued for when you were useful. For the parents, you were only valued when you had good grades or when you were able to take care of your siblings when they were away. For the friends, you were only valued when you did the homework or made a funny joke. The painful reality is here that from a young age, you got used to the fact that being authentic wasn't enough. You only had this feeling of being complete if other people were able to validate you and show that you were good enough. But I digress. I said that this was a cycle, a perpetuating cycle, so let's exactly discuss what is happening here. Relying on the validation of other people just so you can feel complete bends you into a behavior that is not loyal to your well-being, but to the well-being of all the people you want to be validated by. And this discrepancy between who you are and who you make yourself to be causes you to be inauthentic. We've already discussed this throughout the first minutes of the video. And this is where the cycle starts picking up a lot of momentum, because the more inauthentic you are, the harder it is for you to appreciate your true self. And the harder it is for you to appreciate and identify that true self, the harder it is for you to validate it. And as you notice, we're at the beginning of the cycle again. Lack of validation, need for approval, becoming more inauthentic in the process, therefore having more trouble validating yourself and therefore needing more validation. And what essentially happens here is the cycle repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats until you don't even know who you are anymore. This is of course the worst case scenario. It doesn't get this bad for everybody, but for some people, what they're doing is living a life that is not built by their best interests, but built on the best interests of everybody else but them. The main thing that you have to understand here is that every cycle you go through, this hole of validation that needs to be filled by other people gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until you fully rely on the approval of other people in order to feel complete, in order to feel like you're you. And I mean, we can think about so many examples, but I think relationships do a really good job of representing this example where you have at least one of the partners being inauthentic and saying how by the end of the toxic relationship, because often the relationship ends up being very toxic, how they totally change, how they've been molded into an individual who's something totally different than what they used to be, and how they are now somebody that they can't even recognize anymore. I mean, just think about it, and we can also include normal friendships here, by the way. If in every text message, every social media post, every meetup, you portray a version of yourself that is inauthentic, a version of yourself you would normally not be, of course, with every single unit of time you spend with these people, you will lose your real personality and reduce whatever is left of it to nothing but a fake person. And this is where we come to one of the biggest curses of a people pleaser, because even though they are questioning themselves, what the hell am I doing? They can still not help themselves because they need to rely on that validation. They have to perform that version of themselves in order to feel complete, because they are simply already too far down that path. And it's sad because a lot of this behavior happens subconsciously, and often it's not even their fault. It's not their fault that their parents or that the friends they had back then treated them in a specific way and only valued them for when they were useful. So what's the solution? Well, I think it all comes down to breaking the perpetuating cycle of inauthenticity that we just discussed and becoming an authentic version of yourself. A version of yourself that right now you would only show to the people you like the most, to the people you care about the most. And if you're now saying, but I don't really like that unrestricted version of myself, that's why I keep it private, then you have to start working on it. Because what are you really worried about? Are you too naive? Are you too impulsive? Are you not lucid enough in articulating your thoughts? It has to be something. I want you to think exactly about what that issue could be. Because to all those flaws, there's a solution. If you're too impulsive, start doing more meditation. If you are not lucid enough in your articulation, well then start taking on communication skill classes, or just watch some YouTube videos on how to communicate properly. There are a lot of good videos out there. I can recommend Vin Zhang. I hope I pronounced his name correctly, because Complicated name, man. Being confident in that authentic version of yourself is so necessary if you want to stop being a people pleaser. Because all of a sudden, if you have yourself and you're proud of it and you can fully validate it because you appreciate it, you don't care what happens if you say no. You don't care what happens if you give an honest opinion and other people hate you for it because you know you're being you. And at least people are hating a version of yourself that you know you love. You see, for people pleasers, this is the opposite. You don't love yourself, and that's why you are so scared if other people hate you, because if they hate you, everybody hates you, including yourself. And to further support my point, I want to shine light on a 2024 experimental research paper that was published by Nature Scientific Reports, where its participants were asked by a requester to perform a tedious and time-consuming task. And what did the results show? The participants only felt comfortable to say no when the requester provided a framework that authorized the refusal. So until they had a script that allowed them to feel more confident so that they could say no, they were scared. Mainly because without this script, the social pressure to comply was so high. And now one could argue, okay, the reason for why the participants were scared of saying no was something totally different and actually not psychological. But that's not what I want to address here. I want to address that if you have something that gives you the confidence to say no, in the case of the research paper, it was a script. In the case of people pleasing, it is being your true authentic self. You are much more likely to actually then do so. And now one might ask the question, okay, I mean, all the stuff that you're saying has probably not been said for the first time, so why are people still struggling to make this transformation to become a more authentic version of themselves? The thing is, this transformation can either be the easiest thing in your life or the hardest thing in your life. And I think for the majority of people trying to do it, it is the hardest thing in their life. Because the stakes are high that with a new mind and a new personality, you will create a new lifestyle. So a new partner, a new job, a new social circle, a new source of interests. And you don't have to be worried about this because for the first time in your life, you're moving towards a life that is tailored to what you want and what makes you truly happy, not what makes other people happy. It's the best transformation that you could ever have. It cannot be any better than this. So if you're somebody who until now considered themselves to be a people pleaser, I hope that this video was able to give you a little bit of clarity. But if you're somebody who just wanted to figure out why people pleasing is such a widespread phenomenon in the first place, now you know it. It should be clear by now for every single viewer that people pleasing is not something that you do in order to be a better person. It is something that you do in order to feel better about yourself. Nothing else. And that the more you do it, the more you act in bad faith. But not only has an existentialist philosopher figured out 80 years ago that people pleasing or limiting yourself to a certain identity and therefore constricting yourself from a greater future is self-deception, but there's also an almost 2,000-year-old Bible verse that already warned of the act of people-pleasing, and that's how I also want to end this video. Matthew chapter 6, verse 1. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. And with that, see you in the next one.